This is IA Forward, your playbook for success as an independent insurance agent. Here to help you knock it out of the ballpark are your hosts, Shane Tatum and Tonya Lead.
Welcome to IA Forward. Today is a very special day because Shane came up with the topic. So I really don't have any idea where this is going to go, and he is leading this episode.
Well, I was going to do the welcome because you called me out on a prior podcast that said, why don't you ever do the welcome, Shane? When you have a 10 out of 10 on something, why would you break that? Since you've always done the welcomes, why would I want to embarrass myself by doing a welcome? Here I am, stepping out, picking a topic. Who knows where this is going to go, but it's not my comfort zone. I like to just show up and talk. And for somebody to say, here's what we're going to talk about today. That is where the podcast has taken us over the years. Maybe this is me getting out of my comfort zone a little bit. How about that?
I will fully embrace that.
Let's just dive right in. Let's talk about chaos. Something hit me just really in the last couple of months. I read a book called The Science of Scaling. It's a very interesting book, and it's kind of centered around this idea that you have to challenge yourself if you want to scale your business. There's several different things in there. And so if you're a young business owner today, young agency owner, understand when you read these business books that you don't have to agree 100% with them. The goal is to pick up a single nugget out of a book. There's several books that I would talk about throughout my career where I may have only gotten one thing out of that book, but that one thing was so important that it has stuck with me for 20 years. The times I can recall our business growing, me growing personally, came out of times of chaos.
When I read any kind of nonfiction book, I go into it with the mindset if I'm going to take three things away from this that are really fantastic, and three things that I am not going to do, things that don't resonate with me, things that aren't going to work with me, and figure out exactly why on those three things that are positive and negative.
Make sure that 3's the limit. Don't say 3 or 4. If you got to say, like typical sales and marketing people like we are, where you got to say, well, I want to get 3 or 4 things. Don't do that. Say 2 or 3. Say 2 or 3. Don't say 3 or 4.
That's why I have 3 specifically.
I know how people can be, and I know how I can be. I think that's what we do. It's kind of that overcommit nature of the marketer, the salesperson. That brain is usually not super disciplined. The ones that are really successful tend to be super disciplined on top of sales oriented. It's really important you stay small. That's why I say, even though I might have hoped for 3 things, if I got one thing, then it was successful. I would have called a particular book successful for me if I got one thing out of that.
The interesting thing about The Science of Scaling, which is written by Benjamin Hardy and Blake Erickson, if you want to look that up, you may see it at an airport. It's bright yellow with a big hot pink balloon on it. The subtitle of it is Grow Your Business Bigger and Faster Than You Think Possible. I didn't originally pick it up because I thought it would be kind of gimmicky. I'm not one of those grow bigger, grow faster, be a millionaire by the end of the year kind of person. I didn't read this book until later. I didn't like the title, so I judged a book by its cover.
Yeah, I think that's fair too. I was turned off by this book initially as well. And here's what I decided to do. I decided to read it anyway and make myself a little bit uncomfortable. Then when I got into it, I realized that there was some nuggets in it that I needed to take away, kind of like the 3 things. There were a few nuggets that I needed to take away. And then I started evaluating our history through the lens of this book. And I thought, okay, this needs translation. I know that I do not have a worldwide audience, but my audience that I do have, my tribe, needs someone to translate the 10x, 12x world. There's been this huge push over the last decade. It's this push of bigger, achievement society. You got to be more, you can do more. And 10x, 12x, your business started becoming really popular on social media around the business side of things. LinkedIn is very adamant. Lots of people out there with this 10x, 12x concept. It made me start thinking, what does that really mean? Does it mean that I have to do that if I want to grow? Where does this actually land within the spectrum of the independent agency system? Let's call it the small to mid-sized independent agency. Our audience is not the large brokers. Our agent network, everything we play in as an organization, Tonya, myself, others in our organization, is geared towards the small to mid-sized independent agency or starting small to mid-sized independent agencies. And then it's like, okay, we're going to grow it. Most of them grow from scratch. What does this mean? Like, what would scaling your business, what would making things uncomfortable, how does that translate into going from a solopreneur, one person agency to a 3 or 4 person agency to a 10 person agency? What does that mean for me? And out of reading this book and deciding to read this book in the first place, after kind of being turned off, like Tonya said, I decided that people needed someone to translate some of this stuff, because there's so much hype about achievement culture, and that leads to burnout culture. And then there's just so much stuff that goes into our world today that is amplified on social media, that the whole theme of my next year or two starts to think about, okay, yes, this is exciting. Yes, if you want to scale your business, let's talk about it. But also, what does it really mean when somebody's like 10x or 12x your business? Do they really mean that if you're doing $1 million in revenue that you need to do 10 or 12 million in revenue? Do they really mean if you're doing $500,000 that you need to be doing 5 million? What does it actually mean when you get down to what they're talking about? When people write a book like this, that caught my attention more than the book itself.
The idea of achievement culture is nothing new for those of us that are Gen Xers. This is how we have lived our entire lives. Like in elementary school, junior high, high school, college, and throughout our business careers, this achievement mindset is how we were reared. One of the things I find interesting is everything in life is cyclical. This is coming back around 2 to 3 generations later, and we're just calling it something else. But this is how you and I were brought up, especially going into the business world. It was all about achievement. What can I do next? What's better? What's bigger? And how can I push myself to do that?
The 80s movies are where I go. Charlie Sheen, the original Wall Street, not Wolf of Wall Street, but the original Wall Street with Charlie Sheen and Michael Douglas. That movie, followed by the softer sort of Michael J. Fox, Secret of My Success or Secret to My Success.
That's where my brain went, yes.
For all you 80s kids, there's your memory, taking you down memory lane for a moment. For those millennials and Gen Zers, I highly encourage you to go watch those movies. It's going to feel a little cheesy on the acting side. I saw a clip just in the last few days of Charlie Sheen's character from the original Wall Street movie. This was generational shaping. Latchkey kids, Gen X, we were the kids getting off the bus and going in at 3:30, 3:45 in the afternoon, locking the door, being at home by ourselves at an early age while both our parents worked and had careers. And this was very normal in the 80s. They deemed us the latchkey generation. This idea of growth was formative through some of these movies. We watched a lot of TV. We watched a lot of movies. The dawn of the VHS, the dawn of Blockbuster, your local video rental store, satellite TV, the gigantic satellites out in the back of people's yards that look like we're trying to communicate with aliens.
We had cable.
Yeah, cable. We didn't have cable. We're out in the country. We didn't have a satellite either. If you had a satellite the size of a small convenience store, then you were kind of bougie during the 80s. This whole thing made me stop and think. It stopped me in my tracks. And it's like, what do we communicate here? How do we navigate through the people selling you something and calling it 10X or whatever, and actually translate that down to our business? Like, what does that mean? I think the first question that I like to pose to people is, what do you want? Do you want that? Do you understand what comes with 10Xing your business? I'm going to give reprieve to one very particular specific person who has a concept of 12Xing your business, and that's Charles Specht and the Millionaire Producer podcast. I'm going to give Charles a reprieve here because Charles's audience is a little different than what I'm talking to. Charles's audience is producers, mostly commercial producers, and 12Xing your business in Charles's world. If you see that, you understand he's got the big 12X behind him on his videos. I am a huge fan of Charles, what he teaches. And when he's teaching 12X your business, he's most of the time talking about your commercial producing book, which means you're normally a producer in a larger agency. 12Xing your book as a producer is different than 12Xing your independent agent. Let me just translate and separate those two things. That's really important to understand because I'm a proponent, an advocate of 12Xing your book of business as a producer in an agency. All right. Why not? Like you have this unlimited earning potential. Like you're a salesperson or you wouldn't be in that role. Why wouldn't you have that natural ongoing thing that you should always be achieving for? If you're trying to 12X your business and you only get to 8X, you're a whole lot further along than when you started. What I'm speaking to here is the agency owner, the independent agency owner. I want you to be able to put your ownership hat on and take your producer hat off for a second and understand that you have a choice to make. I'm not saying there's a right or wrong choice here. It is literally right or left. There's no wrong answer. But the first question you have to ask yourself is, what do I want? What comes with 12Xing my agency? Do I want that? Is that what I want out of my business? Because you're a business owner and you can be a business owner with no employees. You can be a business owner with 10, 15, a huge number of employees. Either way, you're still going to be a business owner. The first question is, what do you want? What do you want your life to look like? If you love your life as a solopreneur and you just need a little bit of help, hire an executive assistant, hire a virtual assistant, maybe hire a CSR if you need that, and continue to stay in that realm. Build your lifestyle around your business. There's nothing wrong with that. The first question you have to ask yourself is, what do I want when it comes to my agency, and what do I want my agency to look like?
Shane, I want my agency to look like that big, beautiful building across the street where people are successful and the owner gets to play golf all the time and they're constantly traveling the world, hiking in Peru, doing all of the things that I see successful agency owners doing.
As long as you've answered that first question about what I want, then the next thing I want you to do is say, am I prepared or am I capable of leading an organization to that next level or that future level that I have those European vacation backpacking aspirations to be? Because it doesn't just snap your fingers and happen. There's a whole lot of chaos that you're going to go through to get from point A to point B. If point A is very simple, small, 1 to 3 person agency, you're busy, you're a practitioner, it's kind of mixed in with your lifestyle, you make a good living and you've got an asset, what you have done is you've built a sort of lifestyle type business. I am an advocate for that. I think that's great if it fits that person's personality. There are a lot of really successful attorneys and CPAs around the country that I think you can emulate in that lifestyle type business. I would even say 1 to 3, 1 to 5 type employees. And I think that's a wonderful business. And I think that's the majority of our independent agencies around the country. The first thing I want you to realize is when you say, I want to be that next level thing that Tonya is talking about, I want to have what I perceive that's going on at that big building across the street. First, understand it's perception. In this case, perception may or may not be reality. There is a place that requires you to grow yourself. This is back to the central point of the topic that I brought up to Tonya. Every point that we tried to go to the next level through my 30 years in the business, there was a ton of chaos. I don't know how a handful of people that have been around here for 20 something years, I don't know how they didn't just walk off. I really don't. I think back like, my gosh, my wife really loves me because she's still married to me. And for 25 of those 30 years, she worked with me. There's a few people, Holly, Tara, that have endured Shane in a Jekyll and Hyde scenario a dozen times throughout their career. What's the next thing? What's the next achievement level? Where can we get to? I created some chaos along the way. And here's what I want you to know is it doesn't happen overnight. The social media lens is portraying that it's easy. It is not. And those that are saying it's easy, more than likely are trying to sell you something, how to do it. They're trying to sell you a how-to pamphlet. Why else? Unless they're like in my business, where we're trying to sell you that doing it within an agency network is easier than doing it by yourself. I stand by that. I believe that is true. If I did not believe it was true, I would not be in this business. It's easier to do it within an agency network. That doesn't mean it's easy. Doing it, period, is hard. Talk you out of it. I'm saying that to help you understand that chaos that you're going to go through, or if you've already launched into your venture, that chaos that you're in, there's growth there. There's growth in the chaos, and you come out of the other side of that chaos a whole lot better. If you want to talk about what does 10x, 12x mean, it may not need to mean dollars. It might need to mean business growth. Your business is stronger. Personal growth. You're personally a better leader, better owner. And really over the last few years of the hard market that we feel like we're kind of coming out of in personal lines, and the commercial lines arena is a little bit ahead of us, that was a lot of chaos. Here's what happened. Some of the weaker agencies got bought up, went away, decided to go get a job, whatever that answer was. They no longer are here. I said this to our agency network at our conference last spring. Our theme was resilience. And they're still here, which means they're winning. They've come through this cycle and they don't understand it yet. I think some of them are starting to understand it. But we are a better organization because of what we've done over the last 3 years, because of what we've come through over the last 3 years. It was painful. It was hard. It was exhausting. But true growth comes as a result of the chaos. And when you're comfortable, you don't grow.
This is happening on the podcast as we speak. When Shane and I discussed this topic and he was leading, he started out with, he was going to tell this story and talk about his daughter. And like 16 minutes into this podcast, we've yet to talk about that. We went off on a tangent on a book. We were talking about all of these different things in my brain. This is going through the growth process. So going, let it flow. Let it go. But I'm thinking in my head, this is what we're supposed to be talking about and doing, and it's just not happening.
First of all, I don't remember what we talked about whenever we talked about doing this podcast. The way a business owner's brain works is you have wonderful people that surround yourself as you try to 12x your business and grow your business. And along the way, you become fortunate enough to be introduced to talented people, charge them with areas of responsibility, and you allow those people to remind you about the things that you're supposed to be talking about when you get off on your rabbit chasing tangent, which most business owners can tend to do, me included.
The original podcast topic was growth happens in times of chaos. One of the stories that you brought to me about this topic were conversations that you were having with Emma. If you guys don't know who Emma is, that is Shane's daughter, who is a senior softball player at the University of Kansas, and how the chaos through her training has really created growth.
Yes, this is very true. And for you Gen Zers out there, this part is for you. It's all connected, first and foremost. It really is. Like whether you're a hopeful business owner, whether you're a 30-year business owner, it's all connected. Emma, as a Power 4 athlete, a Big 12 conference, doesn't really matter what sport you want to talk about. It's really hard. There's the unique athletes like the Shohei Ohtani's of the world, the Mike Trouts, the Patrick Mahomes, the Derek Jeters, the Michael Jordans, and on and on. Not that many. There's less than probably 30 to 50 athletes in human history that I would say they can just show up and they're just better. Now, that doesn't take anything away from the fact that they also work their tail off. They really do. But their talent is just so immense. You realize that there's this unique once-in-a-generation high school athlete, and they come through a small town, and everybody's like, this is incredible. This kid is incredible. And then they go off and they play at Texas A&M, and they're number 3 on the depth chart for wide receiver. This is a true story. We have a multi-year state champion from East Texas, and he's an incredible athlete, incredible story, but he is number 3 on the depth chart. He's not the superstar at Texas A&M. And so you just realize that when you have this pro athlete, like some of the ones I've mentioned, and they just look like they're a man among boys, they're just making these other grown men look like they're nothing. They're just not even there. This is what I'm talking about that is so rare. The rest of us are working our tail off, going through chaos. Emma and I's conversational journey over the last 3 years, now going into the 4th year as a senior, is her growth through those difficulties, injuries, being challenged beyond her capability. The science of scaling calls impossible goals. They use this term called an impossible goal. Emma's technically, she wasn't big enough, fast enough, strong enough to play in the Power 4, and yet here she is. She wasn't able to just go out there and hit home runs at will, and yet she was number 2 or 3 on the team last year in home runs. She's just this example in this case of someone who has grown. As I'm reading this book, Science of Scaling, as I'm thinking about the growth of our organization and Emma's personal growth as an athlete, all of these things started to come together. We only really grow when our world goes through some form of chaos. That could be an injury, that could be a setback in the business, that could be trying to figure out how to hire and retain employees if you're going from one level to the next. Chaos is my definition for getting out of your comfort zone. Emma could have gone to a mid-major Division I school. She had multiple offers from mid-major Division I schools. She had one offer from Power 4 school, University of Kansas. And they saw something that the other schools were not seeing. She went up there, bet on herself, and took a very difficult route. She challenged herself. And in the end, she's winning not because she's all of a sudden an All-American. She's winning because she's a whole lot further along from where she started in her parallel world. She was an All-American. Then maybe she's at 8. Maybe she's 8x'd her career. But she would have been a 2X of her career if she would have stayed at that lower end, mid-major, where she would have gone in, she would have been comfortable, she would have been a starter from day one, not necessarily challenged. She wouldn't have felt chaos. She wouldn't have had those hard conversations calling home and talking to dad about her swing or how she can be better at defense. Those conversations wouldn't have been necessary. Just like a business owner, Emma has gone through this on a parallel athletic process. My aha was to look at our business and to look at many other agencies' business that we work with and have worked with for 10 plus years. Every time they were successful in growth, they attempted to do something they probably weren't ready to do. They attempted to put themselves intentionally through some chaos. And that is where my history is. Like when I go back and look at it, I can talk about some points in time where it's like, yep, we started some chaos there. Yep, we started some chaos there. We're starting some chaos again. That's the sort of unveiling of what's going on. We're expanding our organization across multiple geographic regions. We're getting out of the comfort zone that has been for us the Texas marketplace. We are challenging our people. Tonya has been challenged to move from a role that she was settled in to a different role that I believe she's extremely capable of being successful in, or I wouldn't have asked her to do it. But it's chaotic, right? It's chaotic mentally, and it's chaotic for the people from a leadership standpoint, for me, for our people. But the thing about it is it creates growth. And so my big question, Tonya can answer it from her standpoint, but I want you to answer it yourself out there listening. Should you intentionally create chaos? If growth comes from chaos, maybe I would call it calculated chaos. I don't mean just run out there and do a bunch of stuff, but should you create a little bit of chaos so that you can grow your business? That's this theme starting to happen for me looking into 2026 through the chaos for us historically. And so would we intentionally do that? Would we intentionally cause ourselves some chaos so that the end result is we're going to be stronger because of it?
Chaos creates two things to me. It creates frustration and it creates opportunity. Part of the frustration is that things never look perfect. They never look good. They never look the way you want them to look. And if you allow a fearful reaction, if you're afraid of that imperfection, if you're afraid of that chaos, then you're going to stay stuck where you are. And you're not going to pivot. You're not going to take those new opportunities. And the idea of embracing the chaos means that you act anyway. Even when things aren't perfect, even when things aren't what you thought they were going to be, it creates opportunity when you're able to embrace that weakness and use that to clarify your priorities.
I've also understood that my perspective here is always going to be a little bit different than some other people's perspectives. I am not a perfectionist, but I have surrounded myself with several people that are somewhat of a perfectionist, super organized, or they just like things to be so, and they love order. I am married to someone who loves order. Like she was poking fun at herself just the other day about, is it weird that I like my coffee cups handles to all be pointing the same direction in the cabinet? She just randomly said that out loud at the house. I'm like, it's not weird. It's just you. The handles don't bother me. The chaos of the handles going different directions. Now, I will say this. I straightened the handles this morning when I was getting coffee cups out of the cabinet. And so she's had this huge influence on me that I don't even recognize. She's kind of brought me through the chaos a little bit. But for me, this is easy. Like embracing chaos is easy. I grew up playing a sport of failure, and I credit the sport of baseball for a lot of this capability to say, oh, that didn't work. Okay, let's do something else. Some people And I know you're listening. Some people struggle with that. Like some people struggle with this idea that I failed. So now I'm, quote, a failure. That's what I want to challenge you with as you think through this. Failing doesn't mean you're a failure. Failing equals growth if you learn from that failure. You don't lose, you learn. That's the kind of mindset that I've tried to instill in my children, that I've tried to instill in our organization. So it becomes easy for me when I say something like, let's try to do X. Let's try to expand in this way. If it doesn't work, then we'll just go a different path. Stuff like that doesn't bother me. But I know and I recognize that it bothers people that I've surrounded myself with, some of those people, because they struggle with, oh my gosh, I failed. I feel like I'm failing or something like that. If that was Julie, if things aren't just right, that bothers her. But she's also our accounting manager. And I need her to let that bother her a little bit. There's a difference in personalities as business owners and leaders, independent agency owners. I want you to recognize that if you have this capability to jump into the chaos, to try to 12x your business, to try to create some chaos so that you're going to end up with some growth, understand that you're going to have some conversations along the way with people who may not feel that way. They may not have the ability to absorb that failure the same way that you have the ability to absorb that failure. That's one of my growth moments through the years, probably multiple moments, is understanding just that concept in and of itself. I'm like, what's the problem? Why are you upset? What is going on? Why does it matter? Okay, you failed. Okay, we failed. Okay, let's go. Let's try it again in a different way. We're doing that right now. We've got a type of agent prospect profile that we've struggled with. Tonya doesn't know this yet, but in a few minutes when we have a sales development call, I'm going to talk about that in real time. I'm going to talk about that and I say, hey, there's some way here that this prospect profile really should work for our organization. Let's figure it out. That's part of growing through that chaos. You can't grow if you don't have a little bit of failure. I know nobody says, hey, let's intentionally fail so we can grow. That's not what I'm saying. Nobody does that. I don't do that. Every single attempt at growth, every single idea, I genuinely thought it was going to work. Genuinely. Every single time. 50% of the time it failed, maybe even 60% of the time that idea didn't work. I look at it on paper and I'm like, it should still work. Maybe I have a twisted brain, but from an independent agency ownership standpoint, I encourage you to see things through that lens. I just feel like our business is made up of that type of leadership. Understand that sometimes stuff isn't going to work, but you can grow out of that.
Nothing changes without a catalyst. That is a scientific fact, 100%. It takes a catalyst to make any kind of change. Let chaos be your catalyst. It's not that you're being reckless. It's that you're really being intentional when things are messy. Several years ago, I had a friend give me a bag that said Chaos Coordinator. I remember one of the guys at the party when I received this gift said, I hate that phrase. It's horrible. There shouldn't be chaos and all of these things. I remember thinking, that's your life, not mine. He was a business owner and very shortly thereafter ended up closing a business and has had 2 different businesses since then that have not been successful. And I wonder if he had been willing to embrace the chaos a little bit and allow it to be a catalyst for growth, for change, for new opportunity, if he would have had more success.
I think it's very possible. I want to circle back to Emma with that thought. One of her travel ball coaches while she was in high school just made the comment to her that I remember to this day, and it clicked with me because it took me to my business world. And I was an assistant coach on this travel ball team. The head coach said, Emma, I need you to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's part of what we're talking about, being comfortable in the chaos. Not that it's supposed to stay that way forever. We've had some chaos for a few months. And Tonya may hit me over the head virtually through Teams here for a second, but we've had some chaos. And it's across the organization in all parts. Nobody's been untouched from some of the chaos for the last 3 or 4 months. Hiring, changing, modeling, all kinds of different things. Over the last 2 weeks, I've started to feel calm that I believe is coming out of that chaos. In Tonya's role and other people like Julie's role, Holly's role, different people in our organization, they literally would probably like to be the grandma with the fly swatter, hitting me because they're probably not feeling that calmness yet. But I am starting to feel some of that calmness. Now, is that calmness going to stay? No, it's not. But just starting to embrace that chaotic environment, starting to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Those are part of the business owner things, leadership things that I believe are necessary for us to reach our full potential. There's always the next level in achievement society or not, whether you're subscribing to that or not. I think as business owners, there's a natural inclination to want to be better. I want to be better tomorrow than I am today. I want to be better next year than I am this year. Now, does that mean the business has to be bigger or more successful for me to be better? No, that is not what that means, which is back to the translation piece of this social media 12x society. That doesn't mean you're going to be a billionaire. That doesn't mean that if you're only a 10 millionaire one day, that you've somehow failed. That doesn't mean if you are a 500,000-aire. If you're that doesn't mean that you're unsuccessful. There's just this idea that we need to be able to dissect this achievement culture, this society scenario to say, hey, am I growing? Am I growing in that chaos? You don't have to be happy to stay there, but when you come out the other side of it, and you will come out the other side of it, I want you to look back and go, am I stronger because I went through that? Or am I weaker? I'm betting that 99% of the time you're better because you went through that.
Always keep in mind that your idea of chaos and someone else's idea of chaos are two completely different things. For Julie, having coffee cups that have handles going in different directions are chaos. For me, my coffee cups fit in the drawer because they all have to fit in a certain amount of space. If all of the handles were in the same direction, all of the coffee cups wouldn't fit in this particular drawer. So what she would see as chaos, I see as making things fit where they need to be. I spent the first 21 years of my business career either in an advertising agency or in the radio business. And Shane can talk about making things chaotic all day long. Our world is so much more organized than the chaos that I spent the first 2 decades of my working career in. In fact, it's been so interesting as I've made the transition into this new role. I've had several people say, oh, well, what does it feel like to have given that up? Or what do you feel like? Or how are you feeling? And I'm like, really, it's okay. Because I have spent so much of my career in this chaos cycle of always being put in new places because as something needed to be fixed, I would get put there. And that would become less chaotic, so I would be moved into a new position. I learned very early on, you have to be able to let go. You have to embrace the chaos. As I've gotten older, that change, that catalyst to becoming a new person within my role has just really become normal. And I think it's actually shocked some people within our organization. So letting that chaos become what you expect is going to enable you to continue to evolve and be successful.
Totally concur, 100%. And I think that's just part of this growth. And I think that we're all going to be at different places here. I hope that this resonates. The last few years that we've come through as an industry, there's just things that have just been chaotic that are out of our control. How we respond to those things is part of that chaos. How we respond to the marketplace, how we respond to things that are not even our doing. And that's kind of part of the deal, to keep down this path of talking about Emma's growth in athletics within the college athletic realm. She doesn't control the lineup. She doesn't control her position. She has to respond to whatever the coach feels like is best for the team that day. She has to be a good teammate. She's a 2-year captain. That says a lot about her growth. That's part of just also understanding that as an independent agency, we don't necessarily control what our carriers do and what our carriers have to do. A lot of carriers had to make some really difficult choices to make sure they were going to stay solvent, to make sure they were going to stay in good financial health. That's been interpreted by some as being, quote, left behind, that the carrier left me hanging. As an independent agency, I want to challenge you on that. The carrier didn't leave you hanging. The carrier doesn't necessarily have a responsibility, first and foremost, to you as an independent business owner. They have a contractual obligation to you, but they have to stay solvent. They have to stay healthy. And some of them had to make really difficult decisions. And so I think that's also part of understanding this, is that chaos is not always our choosing. We didn't necessarily do it to ourselves, but we have to figure out how to respond to that.
I'm going to leave us today with this quote from Tom Brady. You can't control the chaos. You have to control how you respond to it.
Attitude's a choice. Make a great one.
Bye, y'all.
At the Integra Partner Network, we understand that carrier access is the key to your agency's success. That's why Integra offers direct access to top-rated personal and commercial carriers, ensuring your agency thrives in today's challenging market. And with our comprehensive resources, profit sharing and bonus opportunities, technology and peer support, all while you retain 100% of your book with no penalties to exit, Integra is ready to empower you and your agency to find sustained growth. Find your way to Integra. Visit IntegraPartnerNetwork.com today. That's IntegraPartnerNetwork.com.